And now, here's your host of Shaping Success, Wes Tankersley.
What is up, everyone? Welcome to Shaping Success. I'm your host, Wes Tankersley. Thanks for hanging out for us with another episode. In a few minutes here, we're going to bring Mark England back on. He was a guest a couple episodes ago, and we had a really great conversation, just super interesting to me, words and how they affect you and the things that you can do to propel yourself and push yourself forward. And I think that's what Shaping Success is about. Before we get started, thank you to our Patreon, Nikki Pavlovich. Just so you guys know, our last episode, which will be coming out, if you hear this when it's a week old, if you join the Patreon, you can hear a little after show conversation I had with Megan. Awesome information, and for as little as $4 a month, you can support the show and get in on that bonus content. We're going to do the same thing with Mark. He's allowed us to do that, so when we get done, we'll have a little talk after, and that will be uploaded to Patreon only. So that's one of those benefits that you get. Without further ado, let's get Mark in the house. Mark, good to have you back.
Good to be back, Wes.
Man, it's we got done last time, and I didn't have as much time as I wanted to have, so I thought this would be an awesome second conversation about things and interviewing some of your coaches and kind of getting to go through that and know a little bit more about what's going on within Lifted it's just awesome, man.
Who'd you get? You got Megan Henry.
Yep.
Former Olympic skeleton racer.
Yep.
That's 80 miles an hour.
Man,
downhill head first by yourself. She's a beast.
Very passionate about sports and athletics, and she's got me really. I haven't talked to her about it, but she's got me really thinking about that life as a former athlete, right? Like to be in the middle of that, to be living that, the things that you tell yourself as you get older that you can't do, and it's inspiring. I mean, I listen to books, but David Goggins, kind of the same mentality. It's like, what is holding you back? It's like, it's between your ears, right? And the things you tell yourself, and it's crazy.
And I mean, what's more seductive than that voice, man? What's more seductive and easy to believe than our own voice in our own head? Hey, it's my own voice in my own head. It must be accurate. It must be right. It must have my best interest in mind.
Right. One of the clips that I posted about our interview too, which, that was out last week, was when you were talking about how no one talks more shit to yourself than yourself. Like that is like solid gold right there. Like, I feel like it's the truth, right? Like we're the biggest problem. We just shit all over ourselves.
and wake up and do it the next day. I was talking to, I did a hour-long workshop on words and stories and mindset yesterday for 20 CrossFit coaches. And I said the exact same thing, because I say the exact same thing almost every time, change it up a little bit here and there. And then also, once that baseline conversation has been established, then we can go off in a variety of different directions, which was, and have other kinds of fun, which was one of the reasons I wanted to come back on your show, man. That was so much fun talking to you. I was like, I want to do that again with him, and we can do some other stuff, and so that that I had the the fundamental conversation with those coaches yesterday morning, and I said that exact same thing. I said, who talks more shit to you than you? It's not even a close second. It's not a remotely close second. And somebody says something to us once that kind of resembles the thing that we've been secretly whispering to ourselves all throughout the days and weeks and months and years and even decades. Nobody ever talk to you. And what do you got to? You'll never be able to. And somebody says something remotely close to that to us once, and we explode, and now they're the villain.
Right. Exactly. And that's the thing. It's like that judgment that you get that you've created in your own head. Like you've made the judgment on yourself, and now that you've made that judgment on yourself, it's really easy when someone judges you for the same thing to get really upset about it.
Yeah. They just reach in there and they hit that nerve.
Yep. Something that Brandon and I talked about too, which was a great conversation as well. He said that you introduced him to something called a wins journal. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that? Because I got to do, like, here's the thing, the action part is the thing, right? You got to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I was out there, I need to go to the store, and the next time I go to the store, I'm going to grab a couple composition notebooks, and my daughter and I are going to do this, and I'm going to do it as well. Like, she's going to do it, I'm going to do it. How powerful is that?
It's tremendous. It's absolutely tremendously valuable and powerful and easy. And in a short amount of time, she will be your accountability buddy. The best one. Level 2 class on Monday night. We have got group 10. S a couple of the people in there have children, and they implemented the WINS journal, and they do it. Okay, so here's the WINS journal, and the ages for kids. It'll work at 35, 65, whatever, and for kids, it's 5 to 12.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, 5 to 12, and what you want to do is you make it super simple. You just exactly right. Go get a composition notebook. This
It's
is
a
how
teacher
I
thing in there, right? Like that's the, hey, here's one of these composition notebooks. That's where it comes from.
yeah, and then one win per day per page, right in the middle of the page, and write it out in a couple of full sentences. So half sentences. It's the same principle for the stuck stuff, which I'm assuming that we'll get into today, what to do with stuck stories. It's the same thing for our wins. For the stuck stuff, the stories of ouch and pain and sting and woe that most people, and that's generous, keep up here in their head. This is where most people keep their stories of ouch and pain and sting and woe, and I know why. They're trying not to bump up into those feelings and emotions, which is what happens when we put pen to paper, and it starts to summon up those feelings and emotions again.
Right.
Even though it's smoldering while it's in there, right?
Yeah.
Because that's the thing about stories, negative stories. They burn going in, they smolder while they're in there, and then they burn coming out.
Yeah.
And if you, just like a spicy Thai dish, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, everybody, go down to your local Thai restaurant and get it Thai hot, not what's on the menu, Thai hot, and message me in 48 hours, assuming that everything's working correctly, and you'll have a good idea of the mechanics of these stories of ouch and pain and sting and woe.
48 hours ought to get it cleared out so that you can actually talk about it, right?
Correct. It's a good time frame. Hopefully it's through in 48 hours. And so the stories need to be written down conversationally. Full sentences, erring on the side of more detail than less, with punctuation. The devil is in those details. So when it comes to our wins, which people don't write those things down either.
Yeah.
Okay. The diamonds are in the details. So one win per page per day, right in the middle of the page, 2, 3, 4, 5 sentences, one paragraph about the wins, and that takes usually 2.5 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay. And what that does for kids. So I was telling the coaches those level 2 coaches on Monday. I'm like, you help your clients in their own personal life. They will thank you.
Well,
sincerely.
It's one of those things that I think, like, the value and the benefit that I see from it is, we talked about this, I think, a little bit last time. Like, you and I you probably got it a little bit sooner than I did. Like, I waited until I was like around 38, I'm 42, where I started to realize that I was thinking about things wrong my whole life. And so when you try to undo 38 years of bad habits, it's super tough. I mean, and so to create those good habits at a young age of recognizing that there are positive things that are going on in your life, and a win is a positive thing, right? Because we camp on the negative things. And as a parent, I say things I shouldn't say, and she takes it ways that she shouldn't take it. And to be able to recognize that, yes, there was good things that came out of that today, won't help you camp on the bad things. I mean, it's a great way to figure that out sooner rather than later than to just think about the bad things all day long.
Correct, which is what happens once the reticular activating system gets programmed. More on that in a second. So I told the coaches on Monday, you help your clients with their own personal story, they will thank you sincerely. You help their kids and they'll thank you forever. And what wins journals do, okay, 5 to 12, works at any age, and that's a they'll get it faster than us, that have been repping the same kind of stories and myelinating the same neural networks. Don't I sound smart about victim centric stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so what happens when they get they get in the habit of celebrating wins, and it could be a big deal. They could win a spelling bee, they could score a goal in soccer, it could be it doesn't matter what the size is. They could tie their shoe.
Yep.
Okay, they get to class on time. Anything. Their wins happened during the day, and then when they get titled and written down, they become more concrete and meaningful, and they're easier to pixelate and detail in our imagination, which then, so the more detailed they get in our imagination, and the words are the vector, the words is it's the lever. Okay. And the more detailed the imagination, the stronger the feelings and emotions. And then what happens as they practice identifying their wins, eventually they will identify themselves as a winner.
Yep.
And what that does is it raises their psychological and emotional immune system, which is a big deal, because there are individuals, there are groups of people out there that you hear these words all the time. They're spreading hate. Don't worry about that. Okay,
Yeah.
that's
Right.
super low level. You know what you need to be worried about? People that are trying to convince you, and let's take out you and put in our children, that they're victims.
Right.
And there's a whole weaponized army of goons doing that, and they're good at it. And their language technology is very sophisticated. It's very thought out. They know what the outcome is. They know where to start. They know how to keep it going, and they know what the final destination is. And it ain't good.
Right.
And um, did someone say communism? Yeah. And so what we only if you want your children to grow up and see themselves as capable and confident and good enough. Let's just go there. Good enough. When someone thinks they're good enough, they go do the stuff that they want to do. So I'm good enough to start going to jujitsu. I'm good enough to start a business. I don't know anything about this, so to speak, and I know I can learn. I'm good enough to learn. I'm good enough to be in the room with these people that they're my mentors and not my peers. But if I keep doing this, then I'll get better at it. They're good enough to start, and they're good enough to keep going, and they're good enough for other people to love them.
Right. It's just one
There,
of those things that's like super amazing that, like, even you just think about it, like if you start out where the age group that you're talking about, right, they're the most impressionable, right? Kids
mm-hmm.
are learning, like she's been working on Spanish and she's like on lesson 14 and she's learning Spanish on her own and she's able to do that. Now, that's something that, like, if I went to go do that right now, it'd be way harder for me to figure out now than it was, 30 years ago, right? When we're in that age group. So they're more malleable, and I think it's a great place to start because they don't have to have 38 years of the wrong shit going through their head. They can start out on the right foot.
Our language, everybody. You're absolutely right. When's the best time to plant a tree 15 years ago? When's the next best time today? Same thing applies to us, and learning about our words, thinking about our thinking, picking up the pen, going into some of those stories that still hurt and sting, and that are influencing our reticular activating system in a certain way. So the reticular activating system, apologies, Wes, I negation acknowledge. Do not remember if we talked about the reticular activating system in the last podcast. I did 16 podcasts this past month. Did we
We may
talk about
have,
that?
but I think that it was probably very minor. Like we didn't
Okay.
dive into it. So
Okay. This is absolutely worth our time, and it helps. Well,
and there
contextualize the
may be some
conversation.
people who are going to go back to the first conversation from this conversation. So it's definitely worth
Okay.
revisiting.
Okay. Super cool. So we'll enter into this with a story. Uh, 2018. I'm in Richmond. I wake up, get dressed, walk out the door. I'm going to give a presentation. And I walk over to where my car was parked the night before, and it's gone. Somebody had stole my ride. And I looked at this empty space that was my car 12 hours ago, and I called the police and I said, "Help." And they said, "Hold on, buddy, we're coming." And then I called my dad and I said, "Dad, this isn't a joke. Somebody stole my car. I've got stuff to do. I need to come get the farm truck." And so he goes, "Okay." So I drive out to the farm and um, get one of my father's prized possessions. It's a 1985 Ford F-150. He bought it mint condition off the showroom floor. It's called Brown and Browner, 2 tones of brown. Forgive the dust, everybody. This is Brown and Browner. And I drove Brown and Browner into Richmond, Virginia. And in under 24 hours, I start seeing 1985-ish Ford F-150s all over the place. I saw 3 and 2 city blocks, and I'm like, where the hell are these things coming from? And most people have had that experience. Wes, have you ever bought a car and then you see the car all over the place?
Yeah, every day.
What's the car?
It's the same. Like it's the same. It's my work truck. Like I love my work truck. Like I'm a truck person, right? So like I want
Mm-hmm.
this. I want this ZR2 Silverado one day, and like I'm gonna get it. I'm definitely gonna get it. But like I'm driving around because I have a trail boss, and I'm looking. I'm like, oh, there's mine. That's the same as mine. That's a ZR2. I want that one. That's mine. Like
Yep,
it's just the way it goes.
correct. Most people have. I bring up that story as a way to well, back into or get into the reticular activating system because most people have had that experience. They've bought a car, or even the car that they want. Maybe they just see one commercial and they start seeing that car out and about, and they're like, "Where the hell are all these cars coming from?"
Right.
That's the reticular activating system, folks. And so it's a piece of hardware in your brain that all of us have, and it has some very important functions. One of them is a search and edit function. Okay. As in, once it gets programmed with that, once something gets deemed as important, it goes on a search mission. In this case, it was a 1985 Ford F-150. And then, so now the thing goes, okay, your wish is my command, and it goes and finds more of those things, and then it has an edit function. So while it's finding and identifying more of those things, it's editing out anything that's not that. So I didn't see any red Oldsmobiles or blue bugs or anything like that because it was not the thing that I'm looking for. And it's the most famous study that I know of that uh, that references the functionality of the reticular activating system and the downright unbelievableness of it. That's not quite the right word. The astonishing power of it. That's closer. It's called the Invisible Gorilla Study. Here's a short story of what happened. 2 social psychologists in the late 90s took 7 college kids. They dressed 3 of them up. Love Liquid Death.
That's good
Dressed
stuff.
3 of them up. It's the best. 3 of them up in white outfits.
Go.
So the Invisible Gorilla Study, everyone, is a very famous study. You can still see the original video on YouTube where they took 7 college kids, dressed them up in white, 3 of them up in white, 3 of them up in black, and 1 in a gorilla costume. And the white team got basketballs and the black team got basketballs. And they could only pass the basketballs back and forth to their teammates. And it was a 1 minute video. They filmed it for 1 minute and asked the people that were watching it to count how many times the white team passed the basketballs back and forth. It was very simple. So they directed their attention. And then 30 seconds in, that seventh student in the gorilla costume walked into the middle of everything, beat his chest, and turned and walked out. And that was it. And right. And then they asked everybody, well, how many times did the white team, spoiler alert, 15 passes? And then they asked, oh, by the way, did you see the gorilla? And 55% would be weird. 50% of people edited it out because they weren't looking for it.
Yeah.
And so the question is, and I normally ask this when I talk about the invisible gorilla and the reticular activating system and the truck so does our reticular activating system only respond to 1985 Ford F-150s and Silverados and students in gorilla costumes, or is our language influencing how we see things, and what we see and what we don't see? And I'm here to say definitively that it is.
Oh yeah. It's amazing because it seems like it's funny, like thinking about that. It's like your own Google tracking.
Yeah.
It's the reality of what it is. It's like I was searching for a rototiller the other day, and how many rototillers are now in my feed?
Amazing how that works. Yes. And so see the reticular activating system as a lens, see it as a filter, see it as a pair of binoculars. Okay? It is a pair of binoculars. And then certain words put things into focus and certain words push things back, pull things out and push things in focus. So she's never there for me. That right there, that sentence is going to format the lens of the reticular activating system, and I'm only going to be able to identify the times that she wasn't there for me, in my opinion.
Yep.
And then it's going to edit out any times that she was there for me. So it's called confirmation bias. And apparently I'm pixelating a little bit more. Would you like me to walk over towards the rotor is? Happy to do that.
Why don't you, let's see if that'll fix her up a little bit.
See if we can do this. And and it goes both ways, they never clean up after themselves. I say that, right? Yep. I say that, and I don't allow myself to see any of the times they do, and very rarely is it going to be an absolute never. Okay, she's always interrupting me, or he's always interrupting me.
Right.
I'm gonna see her in a certain way. It's called halo and horns. I'm gonna put some horns on her, and now she's the villain, and I'm absolved of all responsibility. So we got an apple orchard out here.
Oh, very nice.
Super pretty. Yeah, we're gonna make cider this year.
Oh, nice.
So I'm now, everybody, significantly closer to the router, and we might have an even better connection, which is very good nice. Because these conversations are good. I've got some flowers behind me. How's that? Is that better?
Good. Yep. Oh, the flower just makes it so much better.
Super cool. Yeah, super cool. Yeah, and I've a woman walked in and sat down, and she said, I've just got this. I got this story going, and I've had it. My mom used to tell me all the time, men can't be trusted. And she would get all close to me. I was just a little girl, and she said, men can't be trusted. Men can't be trusted. And I would think to myself, well, why? And then I wouldn't be able to answer it at that young age. And then I would just say, oh, well, that's mom, and she's my mom, and she knows everything. And so, well, I guess I can't trust men. And so she grows up, and guess what? She was having trouble trusting men. And guess what? There are some men out there that are not trustworthy. guess what? There are some men out there that are trustworthy. And with that lens in place, she wasn't able to identify any of them. And
Right.
she was like, I have had a couple of great relationships, but I just couldn't get it out of my head that they were doing something behind my back, or she was creating all kinds of stories from that one sentence,
Well, and
that
that's
one
the
spell.
I mean, that's kind of the basis of a lot of bad relationships anyway, right? Like we all have that friend who has had a bad relationship with every man that she's ever been around, or vice versa. You know, every single one is terrible. Well, what are you looking for? You're looking for this persona that has been built up in your head that is not the right thing to look for. So now you spend your time looking for the wrong thing, and you can't find the right thing.
You absolutely right. I heard one woman say, I've had the same relationship with 7 different men.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what you're talking about right there. And uh and that I'm for sure certain that I brought up the definition of the victim mentality last time.
Yeah.
And you know what? Let's do it again, because we are there once again.
Right.
The conversation of mindset, very, very frequently, if it's done halfway well, it will include the definition of the victim mentality, or at least a contextualized conversation about what it is and what builds it. So the definition of the victim mentality, everybody, the victim mentality is an acquired personality trait where a person tends to see themselves as the victim of the negative actions of others, even in the absence of clear evidence. The victim mentality depends on a habitual thought process and attributions. I did it. I normally do a little bit slower, and I already did it on the first one. That the last half of that first sentence, even in the absence of clear evidence, people can and do create victim-centric stories, even in the absence of clear evidence. Sometimes people will totally fabricate evidence in their imagination to it's like I said, it's called confirmation bias, to confirm their pre-existing beliefs. And the reticular activating system is just going and doing what it's told. It'll work so well for you. It'll work so well against you. It's
Yeah.
mechanical. It's a calculator.
Yeah, and I mean that kind of I think this ties into kind of like some of the scenarios that we talked about before. Like, I asked people on TikTok to kind of give me a couple things that like how they talk themselves out of situations, because we do this all the time, and I think that a lot of this leads into that kind of victim mentality. Um, you know, it's you tell yourself things. Here's I have a couple of these, and we can go through a few of these, but like
Love it. Yes,
here's
please.
one from someone said it's been years, or it's years of being told by a man I don't deserve anything. I'm scared and I can't. The what ifs. I could go on. I'm too fat. I'm not pretty. I'm not enough. Period. I can't be promoted at work. I'm too old. I need more. So thinking about flipping that and reversing the way that scenario comes about, where do you go?
There's always several angles. What I would do with that in a coaching situation. So if I had an hour with her on a Google Doc, and that's how we run our coaching sessions. So we get on Zoom, and she's got access to a Google Doc with questions,
Mm-hmm.
and I've got access to that same Google Doc, and we get on there on Zoom, and I hit share screen, and assuming she's on a laptop, which is common, it's not, it's we tell them to, and they can write on the Google Doc, and I can write on the Google Doc at the same time, and we're looking at it, so it's real time. It's that's actually a very um, valuable for those of the the people in your audience that are coaches or thinking about getting into coaching. That is a great way to curate your clients' stories, is to get them on a Google Doc. First
Well, you're
things first, you
forcing
got to
them to put it on paper, like you talked about. Being on paper
thank
is
you.
the reality of the situation. So, I mean, although it's a Google Doc, it's the same thing. It's like now you're writing it out. You have to actually put the words down so that you can read them and visually see what you're putting down.
Absolutely correct. And then you and your client are both looking at the same configuration of words at the same time. It's extremely clarifying. Even a good coach, it's challenging to dialogue back and forth with a client, as opposed to the clarity that having words written down that both you and your client can look at the same time gives. Okay.
Yep.
So back to Alan Watts, when we learn to think about our thinking, we become alive in a new way. He's right. And the fastest way to think about our thinking is to get the words written down so you can look at them. Look at this. Look at the words. The fastest way to slow down a story, which allows you to think about your thinking, is to write it down. So I'm pretending she and I are on a Google Doc, and I would have her write out all those things on that Google Doc, and I would ask her to read them. And there's a real good chance, that's an understatement, that she would have an emotional response to reading them.
Mm-hmm.
I would ask her what the feeling is. What is she feeling? Where is she feeling it? 10's high, 1's low. What number is it? Okay. And then I would ask her to identify a specific event in this current relationship or events. And you go for the big stuff. You go for the most. It's called putting the gorilla on the table. And you get this, you get this, identify the specific event. So the time that he told her you were a fat, ugly bitch and nothing will ever work out for you, title that and write it out conversationally, which is what most people do not do because it brings up that ouch and pain and sting. It's remember
Right.
that spicy Thai dish. And so you get that on paper, you get the story written out on paper. And then so you start to accumulate or organize, curate the adult stories of a victim-centric nature. And then from there, I would ask her to read that, and very likely, because the more detailed we get, the more intense the feelings get.
Right.
And it's a very strong rule of thumb in the mechanics of story, because that's what we study at Enlifted, the mechanics of story. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
not theory, not this big picture stuff that you end up being a stoic. It's like this. And I've seen that. I've seen people try to outthink their emotions and feelings. It don't work. Okay, and we had this one guy on a call, and he this is exactly what he was doing. He was going, I take responsibility for my part in everything. And he thought that because he was saying those words, that it was going to remediate that deep pain in his heart from the failed marriage. And it's like, dude, great. Cool. I see where you want to go. And the spicy Thai dish must come out. The spicy Thai dish, it must come out.
You
don't
can't
wanna
hold that thing in.
Try as you might.
Yeah, it's not
And
happening.
that's what people do with their emotions, dude. That's what they do with the stories of ouch and pain, and it's simply an education issue. Education and intent. So anyway, I'd have her read these stories, and here's where we go. Very likely, the seed events are coming from specific memories back in her childhood.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that also haven't been titled and also haven't been written out. And then once a story is written out, you four-step it. And this, I'll go ahead and explain it. It might sound strange. It's extremely simple and extremely reliable, and it doesn't matter what you plug in there. Okay, it doesn't matter what you plug in there. You can plug a car accident, a dog attack, a failed business, a failed marriage, bullying, whatever, because it works on the mechanics of story. Okay,
Yep.
First things first, title it and write it out conversationally, erring on the side of more detail than less.
Yep.
With punctuation, very important. Half sentences, don't do it. Okay, general half sentences and general themes, and it doesn't cut it. And so once the story is titled and written down, then you have them read it regular speed. Okay, ask them how they feel, what the feels happen. Step 3, have them read that same story 30% slower than their normal rate of speech. And what happens, why we do that, is because when people slow down their rate of speech, the breath unlocks. It starts to loosen up, and we really want that. There's a saying in the Enlifted community: good luck changing your client's mind while their breath is trapped in their chest.
Yep.
It's not going to happen. They're going to smile and nod, and you're like, wow, this is going really well. It's not.
And we talked about
And
that a
then-
little bit because breath is very important to a thinking process. If you're oxygen deprived, then you're not going to see the things the same way as if you're not. And most people who are pissed off all the time are clenching. not
Correct.
breathing, pissed off.
Correct. They're clenching their jaw. Their breath is trapped in their chest. So people are like, oh, I've got really tight shoulders. I mean, oh, you hold your breath. I clench my teeth. Oh, you hold your breath. I get really nervous. I have social anxiety disorder. Oh, you mean you hold your breath when you meet new people? It goes on and on. And so, yeah, it's called amygdala hijack. And so not only is their shoulders tight and their jaws are tight and their breath is trapped in the chest, their butthole is puckered up. I own unpuckered.com. I've owned it for 5 years. I was shocked that I got the .com. I'm like, why are people sleeping on this? It's a true story. And
That's the next LLC of Enlifted.
yeah, unpuckered.com. So we've got an app in the App Store. It's in beta. If you've got a iPhone, you can download it and start playing with your words. And for the first 6 months of its existence, it was called the Unpuckered app. I promise, dude. I promise.
Coming.
We talked.
It's coming.
It's coming. Yeah, and so when the story is kept in the head and it's vague and swirling and seemingly infinite and hard to get to any, you know, leverage point in it, and the pictures are huge and scary, the breath is trapped in the chest. And so what we want to do is we want to externalize the story and unlock the breath. And so that first step, title it, write it out. Second step, read it. And if they have super strong emotions, great, cool. Let it happen. Step 3, read it slow. So I slow my rate of speech, the breath begins to loosen up. And then step 4 is where we read the same story slow. And then when we get to each punctuation, we do this. So it could sound like this. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is a very big deal, because if you pay attention to how most people relay a story of ouch and pain and sting and woe, they're not reading it, okay? They're reciting it, okay? They're remembering it from memory,
Right.
and they're usually saying it quickly, and their breath is trapped in their chest. So let's change up some of the components, some of the building blocks of how we tell stories, and see what happens. So it could sound like this. Let's pretend someone they start with an issue of, I just feel like I've always got to be there for everybody, and I take on way too much, and I'm never doing enough. Okay. And okay, give me an example of that in your adult life. And they do, and they write it down, and we read it, and I ask, what are you feeling? And they tell me, and I'm like, okay, well, what does that remind you of? When was the first time you ever felt that feeling? Does it take you back to a specific time in your childhood, specific theme? And half the time people go there just like that. Okay. Another 40% of the time it takes them 20 seconds, which is nothing. And they, well, yeah, that reminds me of when, my parents sat us down, my sister and I, in the kitchen, because that's where half the deliveries of, hey, we're getting a divorce, happen, in the kitchen. I've done hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of divorce stories. And yeah, that reminds me of when my parents told us they were getting a divorce, and then I have them write it down. Okay. And then 4-step it. And so that 4th step could sound something like this. My parents brought my sister and I into the kitchen. My mom was crying and she wouldn't look at us. My dad was emotionless as usual. He said, your mother and I are getting a divorce. You're going to stay here with her in the house. I'm going to get an apartment across town. And I'll see you every other weekend. We just need you to know it's not your fault. My little sister is under the table, bawling her eyes out. And I think to myself, well, I guess I'm the man of the family now. Reticular activating system snaps into place, and they go out and overdo it and take on too much, and all the stuff that I said at the beginning, like, guys, hey, I'm struggling with this and this. And so when someone here it is, everybody, when they get the air, they get the breath, take a breath of fresh air, get it off my chest. Before you get it off your chest, you need to get it out of your head and written on paper. And you get it off your chest. What are you talking about? Get it off my chest. Pressure, tension, tightness. Let's clear the air. There's language in our language that describes what happens when we keep stories in and our breath gets trapped in our chest. Clear the air in the closet, in the tires? No, in my lungs, because it's stale and stagnant, and I need to get into this story. Some smart part of me is like, get into the story. Okay,
Right.
that's the way out. The way out is in. And so when people tell that their stories that way, what it does is it when we go from sympathetic to parasympathetic, when we go from stressed state to relaxation state, as the breath descends and gets in there, the emotions and the feelings come up, and the client, story kept in the head, breath trapped in the chest, picture in your face. Wherever you look, there it is. Story written down and aired out, the picture moves out, and you go from the relentless participant to the observer. That's a big deal. And you don't have to know what your clients need to think and do. It absolves you from being an all the right answers coach or person. Those are low level coaches. I'll say that twice. 1-800 I got all the right answers, coach, and I got everything figured out and I'm smarter than you. That's amateur hour coaching. Period. End of story. And so that is what I would help that woman do with her stories, because telling her, what else is low level coaching? You just need to stand up for yourself. You think that's going to work? You just here's an even better one, Wes. You just need to love yourself more.
This is the thing that I find so amazing about it all, is the fact that it's not what works for me does not work for you, and what works for other people is completely different. And to just say that, just to have all the right answers is not the right answer. Like, you can't have the right answer. They have to recognize, they have to see, they have to feel, they have to know, and it just brings it out. It just makes it pop.
Yeah. And no no one has ever calmed down when someone says, honey, you're overreacting.
Yeah, calm down.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah, I am overreacting. I do need to calm down. Thanks. That's never worked in the history of history. And you just need to believe in yourself more. Or here's another good one. This is all trash coaching. Just be more positive. Wow, I never thought of that. Thanks.
Yeah.
No one's ever done that. Right? It's yeah. It's there's better ways to help people with their stories. And so that is what I would suggest that woman do. And yeah.
I think that's great, man. I think that's like, I don't even honestly, like, the fact of that one whole scenario is great, because that really addresses the rest of them. I mean, the reality is that every single person is different. Getting it down on paper, saying it out loud, breathing while you do it, allows you to see the picture more clear and have it in more focus. It's like putting on glasses when you can't see, to help you identify what you see the root of the problem. Now, how do you address the problem?
Correct. It is a tool to create space and clarity. And when people have more space and more clarity, one, they feel better, and two, they make better decisions. They tend to make better life decisions. And stories in the head, oddly enough, take up a tremendous amount of mental real estate. They take up a tremendous amount of
Right.
space. And it's never ending. They just loop. They loop and they swirl. You know how many? Plenty of times. So many times. It's part of the Enlifted method. It's one of the modules in level 2. It's called options work. You know, people say, I've got a really big decision to make. Okay. You know what me, Dr. Rocket Scientist over here says? Have you written down your options?
Right.
And almost always they say no. And then I rarely do I say this. So I'm like, well, that's one of the reasons why you're calling this a big decision. Okay. Because options, a decision to make. Oh, and by the way, 98% of the time when they pick up the pen and they write down what their options are, okay, it's 4 options or less.
It's a lot less than what you think it is in your head, for sure.
Correct. Because you never get relief from the questions.
Right.
Okay, as long as the options are in the head, it's hard to make a decision. And then so it doesn't it feels like it's 44 options. Okay?
Yep.
It's not. It's I'll guarantee you it's under 6.
Yeah.
And I'll roll dice that it's 4 or below. And then when they get them on paper, then they can see it. And we turn a mountain into a molehill. And maybe it is a big decision, or at least most of the time it's not that big of a decision. When you see what path you can take. And it's also the same with the imposter syndrome voice in the head. It might seem like there's 555 imposter syndrome sentences going on in your head, and it's not 50. It is not 50. It's not 20. Okay. How do I know that? Because I do this work for a living. Been doing it for a while, 16 years full time. And I've helped a lot of people pick up a pen and get those, you're not good enough. Why would, specifically with coaching in this case, and it's imposter syndrome is all over the place, turns out. Why would anyone want to work with you? Why would anyone want to work with you? There's so many other better coaches out there. Who do you think you are? How can you help people when you're so messed up? So it's the stuff that we whisper to ourselves, and then then there's the paranoia side of it. This is stuff that we negatively fantasize about other people saying to us, so and so's a coach. Who do they think they are? And you get these. There's not 20 of these sentences. It's just the sentences on repeat.
Yeah.
And the fastest way to slow that dog shit storm down is to write them down and get them on paper. And well, we're breaking spells, everybody. There, I said it.
Yep. Well, I appreciate you hopping back on here. I mean, this is just awesome. It's now we got a breakdown. People can have some tools to use a little bit, and if they want to get in touch with you again, why don't you just tell us where they can hit you up?
Enlifted.me. That's our website. It's all about our coaching certifications. The gram at Enlifted Coaches. We do a free class of live coaching. So we've been talking about it here, which is fantastic. And it's also interesting to watch it run. So every Tuesday night, 6 p.m., I get on there and pull people on, and we work stories, and I explain what's happening as we go. So I coach and teach simultaneously. Very fun. Tuesday night lives. And then we've got a podcast called Get Enlifted, where coaches talking about words. And we got a lot of coaches who listen to us, and a lot of people not in the coaching game listen to us because they just want to learn about their words and their stories and get better.
Yeah, and they're very powerful. And we're going to have a few more guests coming on here that are coaches, and we've had some really good ones already. You need to check out next week's episode. Well, last week's episode is going to be the Savage Meg. She is awesome. Great. Like
I'm listening to that.
Yep. It's a good one. It's a good conversation. The nuggets, they come after too. So that's what I like about this new Patreon thing, where they can hear a little bit more about what's actually going on, because it gives me a time to kind of loosely talk and us to have a conversation that might be a little bit more meaningful towards like me in general, but give some people some really good information. So we'll have some more Enlifted coaches for sure. And I'm sure Mark will be back. But thanks again for hanging with us.
My pleasure, Wes. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Yep. All right, everyone. That was another great interview with Mark England. If you want to hear some of the snippets or the things that we talk about after the show, go join the Patreon for as little as $4 a month. You can help us upgrade the show, get some better cameras, get some better moving into the Shaping Success studio here in a couple months, which will be awesome. Got to get that thing set up. But great information. And until next time, I challenge you to find the shape of your success.